Oh, we just saw some setters and getters, but there's a different way for us to set the values of a class on the constructor. So instead of having the set player name and set health, we can do that on the constructor. So let's do that. So in our class, I have the default constructor, and I'm gonna put a parameterized constructor. So it's gonna be a public player, and the player, this constructor now, will receive two values. One is going to be a string name, and the other value is going to be a int health. So this constructor now receives two parameters, and I can set the variables from this class. Player name equals name, and this dot player health equals health. So doing so, I can create an object and set the values of my class variables or attributes at the same time. So let's say how we use this. So whenever we call this function, this constructor, to initialize our object, we pass nothing. If we pass nothing, then we're calling the default constructor. If we pass two values, and remember those values must be a string and an integer. So the first string is going to be Grievous, and then the second value is going to be an integer, and it's going to be 100. So whenever I run this code, I instantiate an object called P of the class player, and at the same time I send in two values, and these two values initialize my object. So instead of setting those values, I can just get the values. So p dot get player name, I can either print it directly, so Grievous, or I can just get the value and store in a variable. For simplicity now, I'm just printing it. So what if I do not want to do that? What if I want to get this work here, this console.writeLine, and get this work done on the class? Very simple. So I'm going to create another function in my class, and this function I'm going to call print player status or something like that. So it's going to be public void print player status, nothing as a parameter, and what it does, it prints player name and also it prints health. So print name and health, and what it does, prints player status. So our new created function will do some of the work that we're doing in the main. So instead of doing this thing, we can just call the new functions that we create, which is called print player status. And every time I call print player status, this function is going to execute and it's going to print the name and the health of my player. So if I run this, so it prints the name of the player and the health. Now notice that this is a lot shorter than one we had before, and the whole purpose of the class is to save as much code in the main as possible. So I can also have a second player, p2 equals new player, and constructor that has a parameter, and this player is going to be Jane, and Jane will have also 100 health. And if I want to know the status of player Jane, I just use the function to print the player status. So let's see what happens here. So there it is. I have one player, Grievous, and his health is 100. The second player is Jane, and her health is also 100. So notice that with 2 lines of code you accomplish a lot, because the work is being done on the class and not on the main.